Good afternoon. Next up is prisons. And good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, President Clark and members of City Council. I am Blanche Carney, Commissioner. Joining me today are Robert Tomacheski, Deputy Commissioner, to my right, and Gerald Buck, Administrative Services Director, to my left. I'm pleased to provide testimony on the Philadelphia Department of Prisons Fiscal Year 2018 operating budget. The Prisons Department will support the administration's goal of criminal justice reform by continuing to offer programs and services designed to enable the successful reentry and reintegration of ex-offenders into society. This continuity of care starts while individuals are incarcerated and links them to services and support when they leave the prison, with the ultimate goal of reducing recidivism and decreasing the number of incarcerated individuals in Philadelphia. Our plans for fiscal year 2018 are broad-based and take into account most areas throughout the prison system, and the primary focus is the population, infrastructure needs, programs and services, physical and behavioral health care, food services, staff, and IT needs. Thank you very much for allowing us to be before you today, and we will answer any questions, concerns, or feedback that you may have regarding our budget proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very brief testimony. Thank you. Your department has placed precedence on reducing the jail population. Two-part question. What's the cost benefits of reducing the population? And what programs, if any, do you have in place to reduce the population?
So in partnership with the MacArthur Grant, we were given the target population goal for 34%. There's definitely a cost savings in that. The fewer people we have in custody, we would be able to either close our outside housing contracts or an entire facility. If we continue to, currently we're at 18.6%, which is a very progressive decrease in the
What was that percent again? I'm sorry.
18.6%. And that's been since July of 2015. With the anticipated continued decrease in population by year 2 for additional 8%, that would reduce our population by 528 more inmates. In that third year, additional 8%, that would give us a total of the 34%, 528 additional inmates. In doing so, we would assess closing two of our outside housing contracts or an entire facility. And that would then lend itself for the prison to be used for the intended purposes, and that's for the medium to high risk offender that poses a risk on public safety.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just one other thing. You talk in your written testimony about correctional staff training. I know a lot of departments and agencies now are particularly concentrating on issues dealing with sexual harassment, that kind of thing. Is there any particular training you're doing with that or plan to do?
Well, the sexual harassment training is ongoing. It's an annual training. Okay. And so we offer that to existing annually and new employees.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming, Commissioner. Could you ask Ms. Wertheimer to come up so we can save some time? You know, we're on a timer here.
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to get that moving. Couple of things. First of all, congratulations. It's my understanding that we've gone down. So just to put this in context for my colleagues, we were on the precipice of getting sued a couple of years ago for overcrowding. What was that number at the time of the threatened lawsuit?
We were approximately 9,000 plus inmates, and we were under litigation for triple selling, and we were literally bursting at the seams and had to secure outside housing.
And so that 18% reduction is in actual numbers down to what today?
6,692 inmates.
We were in this chamber several years ago talking about the possibility of building a $500 million prison. No, we came together with the administration. The president put together a justice reform commission. Ms. Wertheimer has brought in money from the foundations, and we came together and broke down some silos. Judge Lerner also is a part of the Justice League, I like to call it, getting things done. So I wanted to put that in perspective and then talk about where we are going. And I want to keep in mind that every year I go to your graduation of new officers taking on the public safety role, and I take pride in seeing them do that. I want us to understand how we are morphing into a different type of prison society in light of a pioneer in this chamber like Councilwoman Blackwell, who wanted day reporting centers way before MacArthur said so. So tell me where we're going.
We're going to a restorative approach versus punitive. And restorative is acknowledging that folks are coming into custody, but we have to make the best use of that time. And that is offering appropriate and adequate programs and services that meets the individual's need, not a cookie cutter approach. But while you have someone incarcerated, you are preparing from day one for discharge and release. And part of that is shoring up our RISE office so that there will be more robust pre-engagement while people are in custody, and you can best prepare and plan for when they do get out. The other part of restorative justice is that you don't just release people with a cold handoff. It's really working collaboratively with all of our criminal justice partners that we've been able to realize this reduction, but also working with existing community-based partners and other city agencies. And that's not just getting someone a job. Workforce development is important, but a lot of our folks are challenged with substance use, behavioral health, and physical health care that needs to continue post-release. So when you're looking at a holistic restorative approach, that's the best approach. That's where the prisons is going.
So a couple of the recommendations that we've starting to see, obviously GPS technology. Julia's put together a proposal for something like 700. So, you know, a release but with supervision concepts. One of those other concepts is a day reporting center, and you and young Miss Samantha Williams and all worked on a RFP to look at the concept. Can you describe that for my colleagues?
Sure. So at the recommendation
Just
of
identify yourself.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Julie Wertheimer, Chief of Staff, Office Criminal Justice Managing Director's Office. At the recommendation of the county's Criminal Justice Advisory Board, we put together a subcommittee with representatives from all of the criminal justice agencies to explore the possibility of day reporting centers. And at present, there is an RFP being reviewed to be posted for a feasibility study for day reporting centers, looking at a number of different factors in terms of the population being served, since our justice-involved population is changing so drastically because of the reduction in the jail population and other reforms taking place, where such a center should be, what kind of services it provides. And it's really trying to connect the dots too with what we're doing around reentry and other aspects of the system.
So as we morph with lower populations and consider closing a facility, one of the things, going to those graduations, making sure your staff are covered, what kinds of training are you going to give them in this new concept? If we're using, I like the analogy, Mr. Chairman, if a probation officer and a social worker had a baby, it would be this new type of criminal justice professional. How are we getting your staff to understand that and making sure they understand that job security isn't the issue, it's how we deliver the service?
So a lot of that has been really marketing to the workforce and understanding that this is not just a job you do, but it impacts you as a citizen. And so if we're not able to really lend ourselves to being not only role models providing security, that impacts our individual communities. The other part of that is really educating the staff about the initiatives that are underway. And that's been educating and discussing the success we've had from MacArthur. So staff are aware of the efforts of not just the prisons, but the criminal justice cluster. In addition, looking at training that is new, coding training. Every time we introduce a new program and services, that's delivered to the staff so they have an understanding on where we're going. When we initially introduced the tablet education project, you know, this is why they're going to have it. This is the reason. These are the safeguards. So it's really educating our workforce, because we all have a stake in when people leave State Road, they're coming back to our communities. Do we want them better off? Yes, because then they buy into being a partner of a community.
So I got the chairman up there. He is not the substitute teacher, so I'm going to listen to the bell. In our next go-round, I want to talk about the differences between the Riot and Delaware and why we're not going to be the facility.
And Councilman, if I can just add something though to your question about training, I also want to mention, and I think it's because we're very excited about this, all of the criminal justice agencies, and it's going to take a while to roll this out, but starting May 1st are going to begin implicit and explicit bias training. And it's going to be customized kind of for every agency, because what the correctional officers receive is probably a little bit different than, say, the public defenders, but that's a process that we're starting. It's something that's funded by the MacArthur grant, but has been looked at for a while by a lot of the agencies, and we're finally beginning to roll that out.
Okay.
He cut my mic off. Thank you, and I want to thank Judge Lerner for his involvement as well.
Just for the record, I didn't cut your mic off, okay? All right. Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here today, also with your team. And I also want to acknowledge the administration for your appointment. And so it truly was historic, and look forward to doing great things with you under your leadership. My questions are around the issue of juveniles who are housed on State Road, and specifically the issue of solitary confinement. And I know the level of awareness was brought around this particular issue regarding the Khalif Browder story, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but it specifically deals with the issue of solitary confinement of juveniles. And I remember last year there was an article where you talked about not being supportive of that type of approach in addressing young people. But I want to get an idea of what you are doing to address it. What's the process in handling juveniles in adult settings? Also, we know female juveniles are housed at Riverside, which is we have an adult population, and how they are addressed to make sure that they are still held accountable, which they should be, but an environment that's conducive for them developing. I also often tell people, as an adult, there are plenty of things I would not have done when I was a juvenile. And there are some things I've done when I was a juvenile that I definitely wouldn't do now as an adult. And so I take this very serious, because if we can help our young people rehabilitate early on, then we don't have to deal with them going on to Greater Ford and Cole Township, because we addressed it on the juvenile level. But some commit acts that put them in an adult environment. And I used to come up the State Road to address the juveniles with mothers in charge. And I recognized that some of those young people had no clue that they will be going away for a very, very long time. And so can you give us an overview of how you're addressing this?
So we've been really canvassing our fellow correctional partners to see what policies they've developed. First and foremost, I believe that the staff on State Road, especially working with the juveniles, we understand trauma, we understand the developmental deficits that happen at the onset of trauma, and understanding they're not adults, but they're housed in an adult system set aside from the adult population. There is on occasion time where we have to separate because they may have gotten into a fight and we can't allow further injury of any sort. And so there's a time when we will separate. And for that purpose, they're not just placed in a cell with no human interaction. If anything, they get, we have rounds by our psychology team, our social workers, and the correctional staff. So it's never a solitary as other jurisdictions have defined it. And part of that is the engagement, helping them work through what happened, what led up to being separated out for a defined period of time, but looking at trauma, addressing that, addressing coping skills and mechanisms that our young people need today, that should something else happen, how can we de-escalate this? Because they're such a small population. They're in a community school together, so you're going to see this person again. So one, really looking at the work of our other judicial partners, and can we glean wisdom and experience from their policies. We do have our team, our policy and team that's really looking at crafting how we would work. There are several things that have been used in other jurisdictions, such as safety chairs or tables. And so when you talk about solitary confinement, that's normally putting someone in a cell, isolating them. But at some point, you have to therapeutically bring them back out, so increasing more time out of the cell, giving them goals and incentives to develop those coping mechanisms, and then looking at exploring what the industry has to offer. And so when you talk about security chairs or tables, those folks that have committed an infraction can still then be brought out in a group setting and strategically placed so that they don't interact in a negative way again, but we can still do the therapeutic timeout process.
Okay. And this is a follow-up. I know on a national level, our president has banned solitary confinement for juveniles in federal facilities, and now there's legislation from Democrats and Republicans from a bipartisan effort to make it permanent, right? How can we take steps forward in the city of Philadelphia? And I guess as a commissioner, if we did start this movement from a city standpoint, members in council, would you be supportive of it?
I would be supportive if we had the support of funding. Anytime you have a population that's a threat to the population, you will have to place them in a more secure area. That's going to require additional staff. That's not the same correctional officer to staff, because now you're dealing with a more maybe assaultive population. Yes. But from the therapeutic perspective, you need additional staff, psychologists, psychiatrists, some program folks to do engagement to increase more time out of cell. And that's what you're building up to. Anytime you have someone in segregation for a period of time, you have to increase the staffing capacity with treatment and CBT in order to increase out of cell time. And that's a gradual process. That's not an overnight, but the funding has to be in place for that to happen.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman, she's not here. Councilman Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Thank you. Typical question I'm going to ask you is, in your budget, is there an allocation in here for fringe benefits, or is that above the budget?
Fringe benefits, Jerry Buck, Administrative Services Director of Prisons. Fringe benefits has always been separated in the Finance Department.
And do you know how much the fringe benefits as a percentage of compensation is?
Usually it's in the 40% range.
40%?
Yes.
Okay. So then if I'm looking at your proposed appropriations for fiscal year 18, and I'm looking at 147 million in employee compensation, it really is closer to 200 million roughly when you include benefits?
Yes.
210?
Correct.
So that we have to really add that up to 310 million when you add in the benefits?
You're correct.
And then if I'm looking at total cost to run the prisons, I'm looking at 310 million, plus I'm looking at the medical care for the prisoners, which is 65 million.
Correct.
And the food service, which is about 14 million. So I'm coming out to close to $61,000 to $62,000 per year per prisoner.
I mean, I can tell you...
Sir, a little closer to the microphone.
Sorry. I can tell you exactly what I calculated for the 18 budget, and that's using indirect cost, fringes and indirect cost. And so I'm going to find a sheet. It was about, let's see, it was 135.
Well, let me ask you this question, though. If you include the food costs, the healthcare costs, and the cost to run the prison, including the benefits, it comes out to a figure that equates to about $62,000 per prisoner. If you have 6,600 prisoners there right now, according to the information. Is that about right?
Well, we have 6,600, about 6,600 right now, so 135 a day.
Right.
Times 6,600.
So here's
Times
the,
365, I don't have a calculator with me.
right. But what I've seen, the prison population's gone down. In fiscal year 16, it was 7,500, and our overhead goes up. Why isn't our overhead going down if the prison population is reducing? Especially where we have a goal of 34% over the next 3 years. Should we see some reductions in the food costs, reductions in the medical costs, reductions in the overhead?
We should expect to see reduction in the food costs because that's fewer meals for the population. However, if we continue to trend down and we have the appropriate folks in custody, such as medium to close custody folks, they're going to be there for a longer duration. So we may not realize the health care costs. So 40% of all inmates receive behavioral health care. 19% are diagnosed as seriously mentally ill. 80% abuse one or more drugs and receive detoxification and CBT. 30% suffer from one or more chronic illnesses, and at least 13.6% of all inmates are affected with Hep C. So if we are having the appropriate population in custody longer, they have chronic care issues, behavioral health care, pharmacy costs are built into that, and we're going to keep them longer, so we may not necessarily realize the cost. Also, the the 135 per day, I really just like to put a lens on that, is that if you have a healthy inmate, they're going to get the robust intake health screening and then annual treatment. But if you have someone that's been underinsured or not insured at all, and they're now in our custody, we have a responsibility to treat them to the best of our ability.
I'm not sure your figure of 135 a day is accurate.
Well, actually, I just looked at my calculations.
Yeah, you got it, sir. Raise it up, raise it up.
Councilperson.
There you go.
I just did the calculation, and it's actually lower than 60,000, and I have it at $138 a day for fiscal 18, and that's factoring in fringe and indirect costs.
Well, just go to the budget you gave us. You gave us 200, for fiscal year 18, it's 258 million. You just said that 40% of class 100 is fringe benefits.
Correct.
40% is what? Just doing it in my head real quick, 58 million.
You're talking 40% of class 100.
Right.
Okay.
Add 58 million to 258, you're at 16?
I have 333,000 as a total cost.
It's
Divided
316 plus your medical and your food.
The medical and the food is already in there.
Where is it in here?
It's under purchase
Purchase of services?
Purchase of services.
Okay. So that's in the 105 million.
Yes.
So you're still about $40,000 a year, 42,000?
I have it at about 50,000 a year.
And so if we reduce the population by 34%, shouldn't some percentage of that come down?
Correct. I mean, food costs for sure. For food costs is about $1.52 per meal.
But why would the medical cost? Is the medical per person?
Medical will come down below the population of 8,400. It's $1.31 per inmate per day. It's not a big amount of money per thousand, and we're talking about 500,000 per thousand inmates. So it's not significant. That's in the Horizon contract.
Your Horizon contract's 48.6 million.
Correct.
And then MHM mental health is 10.3 and AmeriHealth is 4.8. The total's about 65 million. If you have 6,600 people in prison, it's roughly 10,000 a year per prisoner. Would you agree with that?
Right.
So if we cut back almost 1,500 prisoners, aren't we going to see substantial savings in the healthcare?
Well, right now we're in the process of negotiating, Councilman, right now we're in the process of negotiating with Horizon and MHM. So we are going to bring that up, that our population has dropped, especially with MHM, which does not have a clause as far as I know, and Bruce, our medical director, can chime in regarding whether or not there is a cost reduction with the population decline.
Are those medical contracts per prisoner, or is it a bulk contract?
MHM is a bulk contract.
That's a bad contract.
Yeah, and the Horizon is basically a bulk contract with a reduction for population decreases and an increase for population increases above a certain level.
It should be per prisoner. That's a bad contract because we're going to lose big time in this because it's a bulk contract.
Well, we're in the process. I think we have 3 vendors right now that are being evaluated by committee
When do those contracts expire?
at June 30th.
We should renegotiate per prisoner. Do not do a bulk contract. It's a bad move.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll come back next round. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Green.
Thank you, Councilman Greenlee. Actually, my questions were similar to that question that Councilman Dom had raised, because considering the prison population has gone from about 9,000 to about 6,000 roughly, and I understand that some of the medical costs will still be high because of the people who are in our prisons probably have the most infirm health care. But I guess my question is follows up to your last point. What's the status of the Horizon healthcare contracts? Is that scheduled to be executed July 1?
Yes.
Okay, and have you already selected a new provider? Because I know for the past couple of years, we were going through an RFP process. So is Horizon the entity that was selected?
They haven't been selected.
They have not been selected?
No, we're still in the RFP process.
Okay, because in years past, when this contract has been listed in the budget, it was to be determined. So what you're saying is that going to FY18, that's the last year of Horizon having a contract?
Excuse me again. FY17 is the end of the Horizon
The Horizon
contract. So
contract,
right
okay.
now, we're in the process of negotiating with vendors through the RFP process to determine the best.
And so
vendor.
that contract will be executed starting the new fiscal year, July 1?
Yes.
It'll be
That's your
fiscal
plan.
18, so that should be to be determined.
I can't.
It should be to be determined in that line rather than Horizon. It should be
Right,
Horizon
that's what threw me off. When I
TBD.
look at the budget detail, you would think that they already have the contract, so it's really
Right.
to be determined.
To be determined.
Because how in
Correct,
past years it's
correct.
been under, I mean, this contract has been continued for a number of years, and it was to be determined, and it was just held over. So what you're saying, you're going to be selecting possibly a new provider as of July 1?
Correct.
Okay. Also, considering some of the other expenses, and I understand some of the commentary, as I said a few moments ago with Councilman Dom, that some of the expenses will not come down. When are some of these other contracts coming up in reference to inmate the food contract, the maintenance, repair and maintenance contracts, and inmate housing?
So the food contract is going to, we look to commence that July 1, and we hope to...
When we say commence, you mean start the process of our new RFP process?
Yes, we're
Okay.
underway in that process.
Okay.
And just to go back for the medical, that doesn't take into account the 32,000 admissions that
No,
we
I
do-
understand that.
okay,
No, I
okay,
understand that part.
okay,
But I'm
okay.
talking, but still, even though with the admissions, people coming in and out, and the Medicare
Okay.
issue, and the medical issue, you still, some of the other basic expenses of being in the prison system should be lesser because of the fact we have a smaller population, especially for food, and even for the other contract for the inmate housing. I mean, considering that, CEC, which is a private entity, considering we've gone down to a smaller population, we're still spending millions of dollars with private entities.
And the reason being is that's a lower custody level population. So the prisons, even though we have 6 facilities, we have 3 custody levels, and you can't commingle those custody levels.
The security level. So,
So if we're able to remove that low custody level, then you can then close facilities, but you still have to account for your 10% admission beds and your movement capacity. And if we're keeping then medium to high risk, we really have to take a look at how we bring those folks back into custody. Right now, with those 2 outside housing contracts that you mentioned, those are our community minimum risk folks, and that's those beds. But when we look at close custody beds, we still have to be mindful we can't commingle.
so within the 6 facilities that we have, what's equivalent to the CEC or contract? What's the equivalent within the 6 facilities that we have to like the CEC housing?
That equivalent would be ASD, alternative and special detention, which houses our community custody population.
Okay. And what's the population of ASD?
Today's population, So between our ASD, Central Unit, and our Cambria, we have 309.
Okay, and is that at capacity?
That is at capacity for those two facilities. As for cost savings measure, we did close down and depopulate ASD Mod 3, which has 100-bed facility capacity. And that was also tied into the cost savings with staffing that and contractual costs.
So you reduced the population of ASD, you said Pod 3, but we still use CEC, which is an outside contractor.
Yes, and we would have to further decrease the population to bring those folks back in. We would have to open up Mod 3, which would give us 100 beds, but then the other inmates would go to the detention center and House of Corrections, and that's one of the facilities we're looking to decrease. So I know it may seem simple, but when you start to bring folks back, you have to lower it to a level that when you bring people back, you're not running into a triple cell, and you're then not keeping full capacity House of Corrections, which we're really trying to depopulate gradually.
Okay. Also, I had a question regarding zero waste. That's an initiative that Mayor Kenny is initiating throughout city government, and from the perspective of the prison system, considering that you have the food contract or Airmark, you have a number of individuals living or staying in the prison facilities. What steps are we taking from the prison perspective to meet the mayor's goal of zero waste? Are you familiar with the zero waste initiative at all?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so what steps is the prisons system taking to try to meet the administration's goal of zero waste in reference to either looking at composting, other food reduction opportunities, or diversion opportunities within the prison system?
So the prisons, for a number of years, has participated in composting. We also participate robustly in recycling. We have an orchard and we have a greenhouse there, and so we've been donating our foods and goods from those two projects to city community cupboards, but we're also exploring how we could then introduce that fresh foods, fruits and vegetables into the inmate menu. But we're robust with recycling and composting.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Many years ago, some years ago, before Judge Doherty moved up to his current level, we had a discussion about the future of youngsters who are incarcerated. In my area, in my neighborhood, is the Juvenile Justice Center. And we haven't made any progress, but we were trying to find a way. We even went to the Girard College and asked Clay Armbruster about it, but his board didn't agree to it, to try to find a way to keep youngsters in our city. It would be much cheaper, parents could visit them and all of that. And we're really interested. We're finding that these children, youngsters, have cultural issues, or they may go to schools where the school says, oh, you can't graduate. English was 3 credits, not 2 credits as you thought it was, all kinds of things. So they add to the issues and the problems the youngsters have. Juvenile Justice Center is a wonderful place. People there care about the youngsters. They're good, but they make adjustments, and when they're sent to the Midwest or wherever they're sent, we have more problems, which means more expense, more trouble for the youngsters and their families. Do you have any ideas, or is there any way we can be supportive of some plan to keep our children here?
My suggestion would be the good old wraparound.
Say that again.
Wraparound approach, where you have multidiscipline staff really giving services to young folks to keep them in their community as long as possible. I think it's an advantageous approach that if you have various disciplines working together to address the issues, to not only treat the youngster but the caregiver which is sometimes is needed when you have family therapy issues. So children don't just wake up and say, I want to do this. There's trauma, there's family issues, and you have to build in family therapy somehow, some way. And that's all centralized around them in their community. And people strive in their community because they have supports, they have identity, they have connections, whether that's neighbors, a block captain, or family member. But if you centralize those services for good old wraparound and couple it with their educational needs, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. Commissioner, I just want to follow up on a couple of questions that I had regarding juveniles in solitary confinement. Do you have a number, the actual number of young people at Riverside for the females, young men on State Road who are juveniles? Do you have numbers who have actually served in solitary confinement, and also the length of time?
I can
with you today?
Not with me today, but I can provide that information to you.
Okay, please. And also, I recognize that if a judge wants to hold a juvenile to be charged as an adult, the judge can have them ordered to be held at the Juvenile Justice Center. Is that correct?
It's at his discretion, yes.
Yeah, at
his or her
discretion. So, up until 2001, all juveniles charged as adults were held at the Youth Study Center. And so, is there any practical reason not to hold all juveniles, regardless if they're being held as a juvenile or juvenile being charged as an adult, should be held at the Juvenile Justice Center? Any reason why we're just not totally separating them and keeping them in a juvenile setting? And that place is pretty huge in the in the 3rd Councilmanic District, that I would think would hold a significant amount of young people separate from the adult population.
So most of our juveniles are have capital charges, so I would defer to the courts to really delve into that question as to why they make the decision between JJS and PDP.
Okay, all right. And go ahead, Judge
we
Lerner.
have Judge Lerner approaching the table.
Judge, just please identify yourself and proceed.
I am Benjamin Lerner, and I'm the Deputy Managing Director for Criminal Justice. But apropos of Councilman Johnson's question, I was the judge for 15 years who presided over all of the direct file cases here in Philadelphia. So with respect to the question that you just asked, this is an issue which I discussed as a judge frequently with Justice Doherty when he was the administrative judge in family court, and which I've discussed more recently with his successor as administrative judge, Judge Murphy. There are legal issues with regard to holding juveniles charged as adults in a facility with other juveniles who are charged in juvenile court. And there are other issues regarding segregation based on the seriousness of charges and the personnel that are involved in education and other programs for those juveniles. It's the view of the juvenile court, which I believe is sound as a matter of law, that you, unless you had a completely separate facility at the Juvenile Justice Center, you could not mingle juveniles charged as adults with other juveniles.
Okay. And I just want to go back on one point, Judge Lerner. When you say there's legal issues around that governs if a juvenile charged as an adult can be around another juvenile that isn't charged as an adult, can you just point me directly? You don't have to do it right now. We can follow up with it with my staff. But the exact court case law that specifies this is why we separate juvenile charged as adults from the normal juvenile population.
Yes, I'll be happy to follow up on
Thank you
that.
very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Let's see. Councilman Jones.
See, and I hear to the bell and everything. Two major things. One, Delaware had an uprising, revolt, riot in their prison, and when we researched it, that the top 3 or 4 things that relate to a riot are racial tensions, overcrowding, guard and inmate interactions, and food being a major piece, which brings me to the Airmark contract and the Horizon Health contract that I'd like to know about. So A, let's start with how we're not Delaware, and then B, what's going on with those 2 particular contracts.
So how we're not Delaware is, I believe, we offer, and just by some of the information that has been released, programs and services. And so we offer a variety of programs and services to meet everyone's individual level. When you talk about literacy levels, vocational training, work assignments, therapy, therapeutic cognitive behavior, we offer that. Also, I think it also plays into how we interact with the population. And that's, even though someone's incarcerated, they're still a human being, and this may sound, you know, very soft, but treating people with respect and dignity, and not being disrespectful and dehumanizing. That's another, and I believe that's the work of our security staff at all levels, correctional officers all the way up to the deputy commissioners and myself. The piece, though, is understanding food plays a critical role, and we make sure that the food is timely, they're receiving it as they're supposed to, and if there are any challenges or questions or complaints, we address those issues promptly.
Nutritionally, are...
Yes, they do meet the nutritional guidelines.
All right, but, you know, there's nutritional guidelines and there's ketchup is a vegetable. Are we giving them the variety? I know we went from a system of quick chill because of illnesses that can occur with the chain of custody of food, but have we blended down, cheaped it down to the point where it is, somebody, you know, I've gotten complaints, it's really bad. I know prison is not designed to be the Holiday Inn, but do you eat it?
Yes, I do.
All right, okay.
And I do go to the, so I,
all right.
Okay.
If you say you eat it, you eat it. Tell me about the Horizon contract. A couple of years ago, and I keep now remembering our mayor as my former colleague, he had a whole hearing on this contract. Where were we? Where are we with that? I understand it's being bid again.
So we did announce the RFP. We did a few vendors were selected to submit their best proposals, and that was just recently done on the 21st. So we haven't selected yet. We're still going through and vetting what those responses are. And I have Dr. Herdman here with me. He's our chief medical officer that can really speak to the physical health care, and that's inclusive of the pharmacy costs as well.
Got it.
Just state your name for the record, please.
Bruce Herdman, Chief of Medical Operations for the prison.
A little closer to the microphone, please. Just
Bruce
raise it
Herdman.
up. Raise the microphone. There you go.
Bruce Herdman, Chief of Medical
Thank you.
Operations for the prison. We had 4 national vendors bid for the physical health care contract, and 3
How much is this contract?
40, well, we don't know what it will be, but
What was it before?
48 million. And then
How much?
48.
And what's the term?
Well, it's this, by city charter, it's a 1-year contract with 3 possible 1-year renewals. We're in the end of the 4th year for this contract, and for MHM, which is the mental health services provider. So both of those contracts were put out to bid. There were 3 national vendors that bid for the behavioral health contract. 2 of those companies bid for both. So we are receiving best and final offers by close of business tomorrow. And
Is there minority participation, female participation on these contracts?
Oh, yes, the Office of Economic Opportunities establishes goals, and they have reviewed each of the proposals and identified those that meet their standards and those that do not.
So is the person who had the Corazon, who had the contract originally rebidding?
They are rebidding, yes.
So I'm struggling to understand when my mayor, who was councilman, he has the conditions of the contract been improved, in your opinion?
The Corazon has provided more minority participation by 50% in each of the 4 years of the contract.
I'm not, all right, I believe that OEO certifies that they're minority and female participation.
Right.
I'm talking about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a big hearing in reference to this contract and the service delivery. In your opinion and the commissioner's opinion, has that condition and services improved? Right on the money.
Services are exemplary.
Okay.
Today we had a review by an outside internist who said that he thought that the processes that we were using are hardly matched around the country.
Okay, that's a turnaround, and that's why I guess you become mayor when you can force a $48 million company to improve their services. That's why you pick a mayor, I guess. Because if you're saying to me it's improved that much, that's incredible. All right? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of follow-up questions for you. We're talking about a reduction of 34%. Is that from the current 6,600 prison population, or is that from a higher number?
That's from the higher number beginning with July 2015.
What was the number in July 2015? 7,500?
No, I believe it was about 8,000, but I can get you the number for
8,000.
that, for our 82.
82. So we've reduced 1,600 people, and yet our costs are going up. That doesn't make sense to me, because using the calculation from the 8,200, 34% is like 2,400 prisoners, 2,300 we're reducing. And if you just take an average of 50,000 per, that's $100 million. I'm not saying we're going to save it all, because you can't close every facility, but there should be savings of 30, 40, or $50 million that are being incurred. I can't see why labor would be the same to a degree. Maybe not prorated, but there should be reductions. Can I ask you, not today, but down the road before the budget terminates hearing, to provide us with some sort of an analysis on how much we're going to save by cutting by 34% financially, each category? There's got to be savings. I don't buy it that there's not enough savings here, or we have bad contracts. All right, thank you.
We'll provide it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Jones.
All right, quickly, inmate safety, staff safety. What are the instances of prison professionals being attacked? And I read an article about an inmate being attacked by guards. How many? What are the occurrence ratios? Are they going down? Are they going up? What is the status?
I'd like to provide that information to you. I don't have it readily available, but we do produce it in our core star. I'll make sure you get that. But the incidents have gone down. Our first line, should we need to regain control, is pepper spray. But we've had a few incidents where there have been assaults by staff on inmates and vice versa. But the first line is to mitigate any assault and use what we have at our disposal. And that first offense is a command, and then if non-compliance, using the PDP issue pepper spray and escorting the person to where they need to be.
Now, make no mistake, I can't walk those tears and keep that peace. I just, as we look at Delaware and other places, if you keep track of those kinds of occurrences and the reasons why, you can begin to, well, I don't have to tell you, manage your facility. My final question is, how many, I know we have Coleman Hall and, what's the other one right up there? Coleman and?
Cambria?
Is that the private prison? How many inmates do we have in those two facilities?
So at CEC, we have 288. Net Liberty, we have 201.
Good, say that again. Okay. And so their capacity, however, is what?
The capacity, I believe, is 300 at both of those facilities.
So we have, so I don't understand our policy as to when we decide to send them there versus keeping them in-house, and particularly as the population fluctuates. I'm sure you're keeping an eye towards that kind of outsourcing, and so you're going to...
We will be taking an assessment of
because all of these needles and dials equal a bottom line, and I'm just keep the chairman and particularly Councilman Dom aware of this.
We will.
All right, and finally, recidivism. What are you seeing by way of, is there an increase or reduction in over and over and over arrest and incarceration? What are your numbers telling you?
Our numbers were, well, we define recidivism, reincarceration within the 3-year period. But our reincarceration rate, we're looking for that to decrease with the having RISE now being a part of the prisons, really doing that pre-engagement so that when folks get out, they have a place, they have a face, they have services. And so we're hoping that we'll see a realized reduction in that first year of re-incarceration.
Do you require a released person to have a residence?
No, we do not.
So-
But we do attempt to either connect them back with their support system. A lot changes when someone's incarcerated. And the worst case scenario is to engage the Office of Housing Services should they require that.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Being no other questions, thank you,
Yeah, just one clarification. This is Bruce Herdman, Chief of Medical Operations. The hearing, Councilman, that I think you're speaking about was an opportunity for a vendor that was not selected to get a contract to explain why they could do a much better job than the vendor that was selected to do a contract. It was not a review of the quality of the performance of the vendor.
I remember the comments from my now mayor and then colleague, because I sat right behind him. So I remember his concerns. And if they are better, great. If you're telling me that we're giving first-class health care to those that we hold in custody, I'm fine with that.
We can demonstrate that to you anytime.
All right, okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner, everybody, thank you. Thank you for being here, okay? Thank you for the work you do. This committee will stand in recess until Wednesday, April 19th, 2017 at 10 a.m., at which we will convene right here in room 400, City Hall. Thank you.
No, you.
What's that?
Yeah, good job.
Thanks.